Halloween
forever.
Evening, Steven. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Brian. How you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I can't complain. All right, so listen, I got one for you. There's these two old gals, these two old ladies, right? They're in their 90s. They're outside of the nursing home where they live. And, they're out there. They're having a drink. They're drinking out of the flask. They're passing the flask back and forth. They're ripping some cigs, as one does when hanging out outside a nursing home. All of a sudden, it starts to rain, right? And the one old lady reaches into her coat pocket, pulls out a condom, right? Unwraps it, cuts the end off of it, puts her cigarette in there, keeps smoking. The other old lady says, "The hell is that?" She said, "It's a condom. This way my cigarette doesn't get wet. I can still come outside and smoke when it's raining." Other old lady says, "That's fucking brilliant. I gotta get me some condoms." So she goes down the pharmacy the next day, right? And she walks in, says to the pharmacist, "Hey, give me a big old box of condoms." And this guy's like, "Well, you don't get a lot of 90-year-old women in here asking for big old boxes of condoms, but you know what? Good on her, right?
Sure.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear she's got an active sex life, right?" He says, "Okay, well, what size are you thinking about?" And she goes, "Doesn't really matter that much, Sonny, as long as it fits on a camel." Welcome, boys and girls, to a very elderly Minisode of Halloween's Forever. I'm Brian.
I'm Steve.
That was one of the longest jokes I've had in a while, and also solicited what I can only describe as a sustained vocal fry from you.
Yeah.
Not really a joke.
No, not a laugh. Just
No. Yeah, just a sustained vocal fry. I don't know how to take that. But you might be asking yourself, why the hell are these two goons telling jokes about, people smoking outside of a nursing home? Well, it's because we watched a little flicky this week that takes place in a nursing home. We're talking about The Rule of Jenny Penn, the New Zealand psychological horror flick from 2024, but just got released here stateside. We're going to be talking about that here in a hot second. But before we do that, we got to do some son of a bitchin' things at the top of the show, as we always do. Steven, you got a beer you're sipping on over there?
I got cides.
Before we get into elder abuse, are you sipping on any alcohol to round that out?
Yeah. I got some cides. I don't just got.
Ooh, sidey boy, huh?
Yeah, I got cides. I have from down east, which think I've had something from them before, but I don't quite remember.
I remember you talking about it.
Yeah, it's possible. But they have this 8% Overboard, which is their unfiltered craft cider. So, yeah, they're out of Boston, Massachusetts. So, yeah, I wanted to give them a try. I saw them in the old mix and match, and I saw an 8% cider, and I said, let's give it a rip. And it's pretty good. It's straight down the middle cider. It's actually not too sweet, which is good. So, yeah. I think you'd be okay with it.
Is this bottled, canned? Is this? Oh, I see you're drinking it out of the can there. Is this a nice spritzy one? Because when I hear unfiltered, I usually think secondary fermentation, and a nice, like, really spritzy French or Baroque style cider, perhaps. But that is in a can. That's not to say they couldn't have can conditioned it. Some places do that, but you got to know what you're doing, or else your dang cans explode. Is it nice and spritzy and dry, or is it just kind of standard carbonation?
I wouldn't say it's fully dry, but I would say it has a little bit of that, like Prosecco-y dryness to it. Like, it is
little tannic quality.
Yeah, it's it's a little higher end than just drinking a woodchuck. So yeah, it's a little more classy than that, but I wouldn't put it way up there.
I see. Yeah, I haven't had a cider in a while. Boy, now you get me all horned up to drink some cider.
I'll say Arsenal definitely does drier stuff than this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I need to get after some cider here. It's summertime, and I know people think fall's great for cider. Of course it is. But you get a nice dry cider in the summertime. Refreshing. I'm not really in the summer mode here yet. I'm still in spring. And I'm drinking on a beer, which I'm pretty sure I already drank on the podcast once, but I still got a couple bottles of it left, and I have not bought any beer in a hot second. So I'm getting through what I have in the fridge. And I did not, I was too busy trying to figure out the fucking internet situation, which I'll explain here in a second. But so I didn't have any opportunity to chill anything that was in the cellar. So I grabbed something out of the old beer fridge. I'm drinking one of these little Naders from Trogs, which is their Bock beer, which I think I drank a few weeks ago, but it's just a nice 5.5% malty as fuck Bock beer. And it is spring. Spring has officially sprung. Mm-hmm. And this is the time for Bock beer. A Maibach, perhaps, might be a little bit more appropriate, a Hellesbock or something like that. But you know what? I like a good malty amber colored Bock beer any time of the year, frankly. For those of you who wanted to join us in the Discord, those of you who are in the Discord with us now, we got delayed about an hour because your boy had some internet issues. So I was trying to figure out that rather than actually putting something in the fridge.
Mm-hmm. They ain't got time to get it cool.
But I ain't mad. This is drinking nice.
That's good.
All right. Couple other things we got to do at the top of the show. First of all, before we get into maybe what all you are waiting on aside from this movie, but talking about what our selections for next week's Showdown episode for the lovely month of April is going to be. Before we get into all of that, you might be asking yourself, well, first of all, what the fuck is a Showdown episode? And I say, hold your horses. I'm about to tell you. Every month we put out some yummy, tasty content on the internet every Monday. And the first Monday of every month, we do what's called a Showdown episode. We have a big old spinny ass wheel of topics. We pick 3 of them, and then our social media friends and listeners vote, help us to choose what that topic's going to be, what the ultimately winning topic is going to be for that month. And then we pick a movie associated with that topic. And then me, Steve, and our guest, or perhaps our Patreon friends combined, collectively, pick a movie associated with that topic, and then we argue about it. And someone ends up getting put in the Boston Crab. Someone ends up getting a belly-to-back suplex. Eventually, we vote, and somebody takes home that Sumbitchin' Championship strap for the month. We already did the first couple parts of that equation here. We have a topic. It's Creatures from the Deep. This is a returning topic, which is quite rare because we have so many options out there. But this, for whatever reason, when it gets on the old vote, it tends to win. Mm-hmm. People like them sea creatures. People like them slimy things from the deep. Coincidentally, I'm also currently rereading Call of Cthulhu. So I am all about that slimy, oozy, weird, tentacle-faced ocean monsters. And maybe that might come into my pick. Who fucking knows? But if you want to help us to vote, if you want to give us suggestions for these types of shows or even mini-sodes, slide into the old DMs on Instagram or the Blue Sky or the X or whatever the fuck if you want. And we'll get them that way. Or if you want to send us an old-fashioned email, feel free to do that at halloweensforeverpod@gmail.com. One last thing before we get into these picks, because I'm fired up. I'm horned up to hear what these picks are going to be because I got about 4 or 5 and I am undecided. Steve, why don't you tell all... Yeah, per usual. I act like that's like some sort of fucking rare occurrence. Tell the boils and ghouls what kind of fun stuff we got going over on the Patreon, because it do be popping off over there, I dare say.
Yeah, it do be popping off. And part of that popping off is you also get to be part of the Discord. But really, all you got to do, go to patreon.com/HalloweenIsForever, pay that $5 a month, get that rascal tier.
Give us that paper money. Give it to us.
Give
me your money.
give money.
No, we're doing two different tones. Yours is like please, like a please tone. Mine's a threatening, like a strong arm robbery.
Right.
Give me your money.
It's called good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
You demand
works every time.
And then I also say, give money, please. Me money now.
Yeah. Give me your money.
But hey, you give us that money, whether it's because of good cop or because of bad cop, and you get on the Discord, you get reviews and recos. I was posting early designs of the latest shirt I put up of the Alaskan dog wrestling shirt that I put out.
Okay.
I was posting early proofs.
I haven't seen this yet. This is a reference, of course, to the thing from another world.
Yep.
Where there's a gentleman who his passion in life is to just suplex dogs.
Yes.
Take a bunch of huskies to Suplex City. That's what he does in his spare time.
Yep, and that's exactly what the shirt is. It's basically like a college wrestling shirt, but with instead of two silhouettes grappling, it's a silhouette of a man suplexing a dog. So get on the TeePublic and buy one of those for yourself. Somebody already has, and it wasn't you because you haven't seen it. So
no, it wasn't me. Sometimes the first person to buy our shirts is me. That is oftentimes the case.
But yeah, get on there. And
it was Dan. I see Dan in the Discord says it was him. There you go.
Good on you, Dan.
If it's not me, second best guess might be Dan.
Yeah, good on you, Dan.
I did have to explain my the day the Earth stood still shirt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had to explain that one to somebody recently that I was wearing it. I was actually at Dunham Sports. For you regional Pittsburgh folks, I was at the Dunham Sports, and some guy was like, "What's your shirt mean?" I was like, "Shut up!"
Shut up, nerd.
Explain it to him.
Shut up, sports nerd.
He was just buying a bunch of ammunition at Dunham Sports.
But yep, go on the Patreon, you get all that stuff, and then you also get the monthly exclusive podcasts. We've got 3 of them. It's 2 finished series and a 1 ongoing series. We've got Family is Forever for the Fast and Furious fans. We've got Youth Group is Forever.
Or for the non-Fast and Furious fans like myself.
For the non-fans.
They fucking suck.
We've got Youth Group is Forever for the Christian fans or non-Christian fans, whichever one you want to be. And then we've got currently running 90s is Forever for all the fans and nostalgic freaks and all those kind of people who need to go back and revisit films from the 90s that are basically forgotten because they weren't that funny and they weren't that good.
Do you like comedy movies? Do you like for them to be not that funny? Check it out. Oh, I see Alaska. 6. Too rough with the dogs. I like the fun there. And he's just doing a straight up belly to back suplex on a fucking husky. I love it. That's a quality shirt. Now that is a shirt that, and I have plenty of obscure, horror shirts and stuff like that. That often, sometimes somebody will get it. You'll see it like, I like your shirt.
Mm.
This one, there's no fucking way anybody's getting this.
No. Like the only clue to the movie is it says Polar Expedition 6, which is the name of the camp up there.
Yeah.
But other than that, you have to really like put it all together and probably had to have seen the movie recently to see the way he fucking suplexes those dogs. And then it'll click in your head and you go, oh, I know what that is. But other than that, no, you got to explain that shit to somebody.
I like the size of those calves, boy. Those are some meaty calves on that boy.
I'm not going to lie. It's just, I took Zangief from Street Fighter.
That looks like Zangief, with those big ass legs.
Yeah, I changed his head a bit so it looks more like the monster.
Yeah, give him a little bit of that Cro-Magnon man, brow.
Yeah, I
like it. Well, go over on the Patreon. It's a lot of fun. Our first one, you get access to all those backlogs of about, I don't know, probably fucking 100 extra hours of content of us talking about some really dog shit movies, but they're almost always very fun to talk about, and we laugh and have a good old time.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of movies, guys, on this here movie podcast, what a transition there. Just an absolute bro.
Hitting big dingers with the new Yankees bat.
Yeah, with that torpedo bat. Speaking of movies, We are going to talk about what our film picks for Creatures from the Deep are going to be in April. And for those of you who didn't listen to last week's episode, first of all, go fuck yourself. All right? Where you been? Stop being lax in your duties. We are going to have Sarah and Kelly from the Final Girls podcast on. So we are actually going to talk about 4 movies next week, which is quite rare. And as is tradition, what we tend to do is give our guests the first pick of the movie. So, Steven, I do not know the answer to this. I assume that you do.
Yeah.
What are Sarah and Kelly's picks for Creatures from the Deep?
So Kelly will be defending Underwater from 2020, starring Kristen Stewart.
Oh, I'm jotting it down. Underwater from the year of our Lord 2020, starring the great Kristen Stewart. What was our? Oh yes, it wasn't Imbibe. It was
Insume.
Insume until you're airtight with a picture of Kristen Stewart. All right, what is Sarah gonna be doing?
Sarah has chosen a film that was on my short list, and so it made picking for me a little bit rough. She'll be doing the seminal Treat Williams classic, Deep Rising.
Deep Rising. That is a quality film. What's the year on that one?
98 or 99. One of those two. I forget.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Late 90s seminal underwater flick, Deep Rising. That was also on my list. I wouldn't say it was on my short list, but it was on my list.
It's on my short list because I do love it, and like it has some wild, over the top violence. It has some acting choices, which are great.
Sure, we love that.
And then it's one of the few films where like Treat Williams isn't just a direct-to-video, star. Like he has plenty of those substitute films that all went direct-to-video, and
sure.
And also it has Famke Janssen in it, which is always a plus for me forever.
Forever and ever. Yes, the late Treat Williams, an absolute just a stunner. Just a stunner in that movie. And honestly, pretty much the only thing I remember about it. I have seen it, but it has been quite a while. So I'll be excited to watch that one again. How are we going to do who gets to pick next? Is it whoever of the two of us who were most recently won, or how do you want to do that?
Are you more prepared now? Do you have a pick?
I have picks. I am okay with going second if you want to go, or
okay.
I have no real preference. I have 4 movies here. I have one that I'm strongly leaning towards. And I would be I have it narrowed down to 3. 2 could reasonably, 1 I wouldn't be surprised if you picked. 1 it would be a long shot, but I know it's on your radar. And then the last one, there's no fucking way you're going to pick. So I have options.
Yeah, I definitely want to know what this one I would never pick is on. But yeah, I'm kind of tossing the coin between 2 right now. I thought about doing Piranha, just the OG.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. And I found another one, but I hadn't seen it. So I can't vouch for the quality, but I knew it would earn points with you just because of the director. But we can talk about it in a minute to see if you actually pick it.
Okay.
I was thinking about doing Leviathan. That was my toss up. I really wanted to do Leviathan.
That's a great one.
But I think it's going to be way too close to both Underwater and Deep Rising.
It's yes, in my recollection, it's relatively close, certainly in themes to Deep Rising.
Yeah, because it's close in campiness to Deep Rising because it's basically The Thing underwater with Peter Weller and Daniel Stern. Like, yeah, those guys are fun actors, but they're not like the best actors, and like the whole movie is kind of just like it's just weird, It's just being the thing underwater. All, it's very weird.
Bite your goddamn tongue, because Daniel Stern is the best actor. But no, he if I recall, it's not his best performance ever. The whole crew,
it's fine.
yeah, that's one of those. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. It's all fine, and it's fine. But I think I'm going to be splitting the vote too much, so I'm going to take another flying leap into a film that I haven't fully seen, but I think it's gonna hit the right notes. 2019's Sea Fever.
Oh, wait, did we not do Sea Fever on the show already?
We've never done Sea Fever.
Oh, we've talked about Sea Fever then.
Yeah.
I thought we had already done it.
Sea Fever and The Bay came up the last time we talked about doing Creatures from the Deep.
Sea Fever is a sleeper, underappreciated, fun flick. And I did it, not that I would have picked it, but I did, when I saw it pop up, my brain immediately went to, well, we already did Sea Fever, because for some reason in my head we had done that on a Minisode or something. But like I said, not to say I would have picked it over what I'm going to pick here. Okay, Sea Fever, 2019, quality movie, underappreciated movie, probably a lot of people have not seen. Okay, so here's my movies that I said, this is one that if you would have picked it, I would not have been surprised, which is I'm not going to pick this one, by the way. 1989's Mr. James Cameron himself, The Abyss. Which is a fun movie. For some reason, I thought The Abyss might be up your alley.
No, I mean, I like the movie. I just don't think it fits mostly horror. You know what I'm saying?
It's a little, so that's the reason that I did not pick it, is because it's more sci-fi thriller. I don't know that you could exclusively call it horror. No. The other one, which I also really, really like and strongly considered, but it drags on a lot of places, but there's about 2 or 3 scenes that are among my favorite fucking scenes in the world. I honestly don't know if I can rule it out, but Louis Teague's 1980 classic Alligator, not under the sea, right? But under the streets of New York City, in the old. And originally I was like, well, Steve's going to give me a hard time because is that really of the deep? But no, then I read I
wouldn't give you a hard time on that one because the alligators are from the deep. You know, they come from deep water, and now they're in deep water because they're underneath the city and in water. So no, I wouldn't give you a hard time about that one.
I looked. I brought it up on Letterboxd, and the description of the movie starts as "It lives 50 feet beneath the city," and I was like, "That's pretty deep."
Yeah, that's pretty deep.
Yeah. Anyway, I fucking love Alligator. It's between that and, speaking of H.P. Lovecraft adaptations, although this is quite a loose one and takes influence from a number of Lovecraft stories, but a lesser known, really fun flick by the great Stuart Gordon, another Lovecraft adaptation by the great Stuart Gordon, Dagon, from 2001.
Yeah.
Because we have 2019, 2020, and 1998, I think I'm going to go Dagon.
Okay.
Because we're going to keep it all in the late 90s into the 2000s. I feel like if I go way back to 1980, I might stick out like a sore thumb. And I've been wanting to talk about this movie for a long time. It's fucking gross. It's weird. We're going to talk about Dagon. And then I just reread this story, which this is a 95-minute feature film based on a 4-page short story,
right? Yeah,
by H.P. Lovecraft, which doesn't tell you very much. Not even one of his better stories by any stretch of the imagination. I would say it's actually kind of a weak story, but he really takes some liberties, and Stuart Gordon brings it to life. So I'm going to talk about Dagon from 2001.
Hell yeah, right. Fish cults.
Fish cults rule. No one does fish cults like H.P. Lovecraft. Sarah's going to do Deep Rising from 1998. Kelly is going to do Underwater from 2020. Steven's going to talk about Sea Fever from 2019. And your boy's going to talk about Dagon from the year of our Lord 2001. Old Ot 1. So you now have your marching orders. You got a week to go out and watch all 4 of those movies. And we haven't encouraged you to do this in a while. but I strongly suggest you watch them back to back to back to back to back, and just raw dog it too. No alcohol, no drugs, no blinking, no standing up, no peeing. You have to watch 4 movies in a row, wide-eyed.
Nope.
Take notes. Get ready for the showdown.
Yeah, no leaving to pee. You can pee in your seat and give yourself a sea experience, but you can't get up to go pee. So one of the other films I found in my just kind of research for the showdown is, I don't know if you've heard about this one, from 2013. The film is called Beneath, and it's a little flicky directed by Larry Fessenden. And
do I know this? There's no way I don't know a Larry Fessenden film.
Yeah.
Beneath. What a crappy title.
Yeah. And it's about like a bunch of kids getting stuck on a lake with a monster flesh-eating fish. And I thought, like, hey, that's definitely for sure going to get me points with Brian. But just watching the trailer, it's a bad trailer. And I was like, nah, I can't fully get behind it.
I'm not seeing this. It's going on my list. Oh, a balmy 1.8 on Letterboxd. Now, I don't put a lot of stock in those ratings, but 1.8 is not great. But I will watch it. I will watch it because I love Larry Fessenden that much. If Larry Fessenden vomited on the floor and filmed it for 2 hours and released it as a feature film, I'd still watch it. So
yeah, that's the thing. It's it has a 3.5 on IMDb, and just they couldn't find like even clips of acting for the trailer to make it look good. Like there was bad acting in the trailer. And so like when you can't even cut the bad acting from the trailer, it's just going to be prevalent throughout the entire thing.
Yes.
So that's why I couldn't pick that one, but maybe we'll watch it for something else.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a good Minisode opportunity. All right, go out and watch all of those and come back next week when we have Sarah and Kelly from the Final Girls podcast on, and we have a good old-fashioned fatal 4-way. And you know what? If y'all act right, I'll bring a bag of tacks and I'll sprinkle them out on the old squared circle. All right. Anything else before we get into the movie that we set out to talk about this fine evening?
Nope, that's it. No. I'm good. We can move on to puppet time.
Puppet time. Well, you know what's funny? This was not our original plan to do this movie. And 2 things. One, I watched this movie this morning while running. I may have mentioned a couple times, like an obnoxious twat, that I am training to run a half marathon, before my 40th birthday. So this is like a kind of a goal I set out for myself. So today I had to run 8 miles, which sucks because your boy is fat and not good at running. But I've been building up to this, and it's a whole thing. So it was raining, cats and dogs this morning. So I had to run 8 miles on a treadmill, which sucks because I ain't that fast. And it took the whole length of this fucking movie for me to run 8 miles, right? It's like an hour and 45-minute movie.
Yeah.
So I watched this on the treadmill, and so I didn't take my normal notes that I typically take. So I have some kind of abbreviated notes. But also, this was not our original movie. That's why I, had to squeeze this one in, because we were originally going to watch a documentary, which, remind me what it's called, Steve. I'm going to mess it up.
A Cursed Man.
A Cursed Man. And did you end up watching it? Did you end up even getting around to watching it?
Not yet. I will eventually get to watching it. But you just said it was so fucking boring that...
Yeah, don't bother. Like, if you want to, fine. Like, it's not unbelievable. It's not like unbelievably bad, but Steve was like, oh, we should check this out because it sounds like a very fun premise.
Right.
It's a documentary movie about a guy who goes out and intentionally gets cursed. And it's this whole thing about like, does he believe in curses and Satan and blah, 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 and all this stuff. Ridiculously fucking boring. It was just this like weird, privileged British douchebag, like going and trying to trick like people who believe in like black magic and stuff. And you could tell when things were scripted, and it just sucked. And then it just was one of those, which is something, and I watch a decent amount of documentaries, but it's one of those ones where you get to the end, you can see that he's trying to make nothing interesting.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to end as a big nothing.
Right.
But he's trying to go, but wasn't the devil in us all along, or some dumbass, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more than that, but essentially what he ultimately comes down to is the story, not to spoil it and fast forward 30 seconds if you want to watch it, but it ultimately came down to the almost like a reverse power of positive thinking type of message. Like, if you think negative things will happen to you, then maybe they will.
No.
But he tries to culminate it with this thing of he's been cursed for 6 months and then he becomes uncursed or whatever, and he builds it up. It almost felt like it was going to be a Super Size Me thing, because he had cancer in his family or something, and he took some blood tests to see if anything bad was happening with his health, and ultimately it was nope, I'm good. And it was yeah, of course you are, because this shit's fucking made up, dude. It's bad.
It's made up, and I'm assuming he didn't actually even exhibit any symptoms of having cancer that he should get a blood test for. He just did a blood test to do a blood test because it's possible at some point in his life it'll come to, that sucks, because
it sucks.
The trailer is pretty cool because it looks like this guy going from culture to culture, and then they have really cool imagery of a bunch of Satan statues or him doing witchcraft in front of a burning pentagram. So that's why I thought it was appropriate for the show. But now it sounds like he doesn't spend a whole lot of time actually getting into the cultural significance of any of these practices, and
he really feels like a kind
tourist.
of a cultural tourist. Exactly. He goes in and talks to these people. Some of them try to take him seriously, some of them don't, but he's very hard to take seriously, and you could see some of them are playing along for the sake of the movie, and other ones are you're a silly boy, you know what I mean? And and then there's this one guy who's the guy who ultimately agrees to curse him, and he's really trying to lay it on thick, and it's tough, man. It's tough. So I was just hey, FYI, this fucking sucks.
Hey,
you might not want to watch
this movie blows.
Yeah. So we jumped in, and Steve suggested this one, which I didn't realize had become available streaming on the Shudder. And boy, howdy, I'm glad that we switched over, because spoiler alert, I really fucking enjoyed this movie. We're going to talk about The Rule of Jenny Penn. Like I said, just from 2024, but just released on Shudder, and I think it's experiencing it's getting a limited theatrical release as well now too, and you can find it on the paid VODs and stuff now as well. But yeah, this is a New Zealand production. And it's based on Owen Marshall's short story, which I have not read, of the same name, and directed by James Ashcroft, which I don't think this is his feature-length debut, but he's relatively new to, directing, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And it was written by him and Eli Kent. Stars Geoffrey Rush and John Lithgow, and then a handful of other cast members we'll talk about, but they're the two main characters. And this is a wild, disturbing, but also has black comedy elements too. This is this is a hell of a production. There's a lot fucking going on in this movie.
Yeah. As I watched it, it became clear that this is just a really, really mean version of Bubba Hotep.
Yeah, I was going to say it gave me, oh yeah, that's great. It's actually mind blowing that I didn't think about as Bubba Hotep, except for there's nothing supernatural.
No.
But it gave me definitely Stephen King vibes. It felt like a Stephen King short story, and specifically gave me The Shining, vibes of The Shining a little bit as well. Not explicitly, but there's a few different reveals and things like that that remind me of it. But the whole thing felt like a Stephen King short story. And I don't know much about Owen Marshall. I don't think I've read anything by Owen Marshall. He's a short story writer and novelist from New Zealand. Maybe I'll have to check something of his out. It looks like he's got a lot. He's pretty prolific. He's got quite a few things here, but I don't know anything from him. But this just felt very Stephen King to me.
Yeah. Apparently, so this isn't the first time Owen Marshall and James Ashcroft have worked together, but they made a film in 2021 called Coming Home in the Dark. So
yeah, that was the only other feature that I saw that like I've heard of, but I had not watched it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. And that one seems to be a lot smaller. It doesn't seem to have like any of the big stars like this one has.
So this film, like I said, stars Geoffrey Rush, who has been in absolutely everything. You'll immediately know him. Pirates of the Caribbean movies, The King's Speech, and then he's done an enormous amount of voice acting as well. I think he's in like freaking superhero movies. He was in the 1999 classic House on Haunted Hill, which if you recall way back in one of our earliest episodes, I was watching the theater when a giant storm came through and knocked the power out, and that's immediately what I think about as soon as I think about that movie.
You know who else is in that movie?
What's that?
Famke Janssen. She's also in that movie.
Oh yeah, big Famke fan. The Famke fan club over here. We also have, like I said, John Lithgow, who has been in a million things as well, but whom I cannot get past immediately picturing him in Third Rock from the Sun. My parents were big Third Rock from the Sun fans. The 90s was probably mid to late 90s sitcom where they were like aliens. Mm-hmm. And he's hilarious. He's very, very funny, but he's been in a tons of serious roles. Yeah, everybody I think probably know who John Lithgow is as well.
Yeah.
Most notably Cliffhanger, I'll say, from 1993.
No.
Okay, fine.
So I feel like everybody of our age probably was first exposed to him by way of Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah, that too, of course.
But strangely, it might have been like my second kind of John Lithgow film is The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Fucking classic. Yeah, that's a wonderful one. Yeah, he was a guy who just popped up throughout my childhood. I feel like he was always popping up and stuff. He's really diverse because he can play just a mean bastard. Obviously, He does a great job of that in this movie, but he's also just wildly funny as well. And I'm pretty sure, speaking from complete ignorance here, he's done a lot of is he a Shakespearean guy? For some reason I have in my head he's like a really prolific like Shakespearean actor as well, like stage actor as well. I might be getting him confused with somebody else, but anyway, just a damn. Yeah. He plays the Reverend in Footloose as well. People of a certain generation will know him as the Reverend from Footloose as well.
Yeah, no, I think he has a lot of stage experience. So yeah. Yep.
He strikes you as a classically trained actor. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
He's just like, when I think of a stereotypical classically trained actor, I feel like I think of John Lithgow.
Yeah. There's something about those type of actors, because he went to the London Academy of Music and Art.
Yeah.
So like he
sounds about right.
Yeah, he's really, really trained at being, a good actor. And there's something about those type of actors who know how to give like 110%. They know how to take it up to the next level. And he does and you can see that shit in this movie where like there's just certain little things that he does that are fucking so bizarre and upsetting. And then like his little dance number on top of all of that, you take the little things he does to torture people, and then you add this, jaunty dance number he does, and it's all just like so upsetting and just unnerving and like despicable. He's despicable is what he is in this film.
Well, it's funny because that's a great example, because I actually just saw, I forget what was I watching? It might have just been something that popped up on Instagram or something, but they were talking about Jack Nicholson's character in The Departed, and how he was so good at like punching things up because he's just, obviously like a, genius performer as well. And if you remember that scene early in the movie in The Departed, when they're kind of setting up how awful of a crime boss, gangster, ruthless bastard he is. And he's out there with his like kind of right hand guy, and they're just literally executing people like that are tied up and gagged, just shooting them in the back of the head on the beach. And apparently, and this came from, I don't know who, one of the people in the movie, I think it was Matt Damon or something like that. But they, he was supposed to just shoot this woman in the back of the head on the beach, but instead he was like, just keep rolling afterwards. And he's like, what I'm gonna comment on the way she falls. Yeah. And he like shoots her in the back of the head, and he's like, she fell weird. You know what I mean? and the idea was, he's done this so many times that he would take notice if somebody fell strange when you shot them in the back of the head. Like, it's just that's a great example of that, just taking in an extra, it's bad enough to just literally shoot somebody in the back of the head in broad daylight on a beach who's gagged and tied up.
Right.
But to do it and then make a comment about the way it happened was slightly abnormal than the presumably 100 other times you've done this.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just like, what an evil bastard, John Lithgow does a great job of this. He is very much he is the villain. He is the antagonist in this movie. And then Geoffrey Rush plays Stefan, who is a really interesting, flawed protagonist. So I'll go through the plot a little bit, and I'll kind of talk about, major plot points here, but please stop me, because I don't have the normal set of notes that I normally do, because I watched this while I was on the treadmill. But so we'll talk about some, other key scenes here, but this is a relatively brief synopsis I have. But so Geoffrey Rush plays this elderly judge, and you get this scene. You get a couple of really memorable scenes right off the bat, which just kind of grab your attention. One, he's in a courtroom. He's passing down this judgment, and you could tell something's kind of wrong. He's like drinking water. He's sweating. Something's happening. It does turn out that he's kind of having a stroke on the bench, but he's also, you get a really great insight into what type of person he is, because he is handing down a sentence on a, you don't get the whole story, but you get little context clues. This guy seems to be a pedophile of some sort, or some sort of, a child predator or something. I don't know. But, and he's just berating him, obviously. But then there's also this woman who is like the mother of the children who were the victims. And she's like crying and like saying thank you for the verdict. And he just kind of turns and starts berating her too, of like saying she's complicit in the whole thing. Of course, we don't know the story, but it just kind of shows to me two things. One, he is, he's very, crass is not the word I'm looking for. He doesn't really take people's emotions into consideration very much. He's almost like extremely practical, maybe is the word I'm looking for. I'm not sure, but it's like he's just like, I'm going to tell it the way it is, no matter the circumstance. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he's also very, he's very, very full of himself.
Yeah,
I guess is probably a broad way of putting it.
Yeah, it's the coming together of like 3 or 4 different kind of personality flaws that have been built into this person over time. So like, he has this elitism because he's well educated, you know, as a judge should be, you know, he's a well educated person, and he has this strong sense of justice because of being a judge, and then you know, this terse way of speaking to people because he doesn't want to mince any words, or like he's not taking their feeling, like you said, he's not really taking their feelings into account. You know, he doesn't give grace just because of certain things, just because they may not be, you know, legally you know, seen as
culpable.
Legally culpable. He still sees like the bigger picture of like, you know, you're kind of at fault for this too, lady, and I'm not going to let you off the hook for that. Yeah,
he's like his self-righteousness, but also like, and again, we don't know the details of the case, but he perhaps isn't wrong, but his bedside manner in berating a woman who was a victim, undoubtedly, as were her like children, but like berating her publicly, he that's something that he could not let pass without happening. You know what I mean? He's unwieldy, I guess, in that way. But anyway, he does kind of like, there's this scene where he's going to like crush a fly, and then that comes back. There's a lot of symbolism around this fly that he crushes as well. He ultimately is taken out. People run out and call 911, blah, blah, blah. So he survives the stroke, but he is partially immobile. He can't really get around super well. He's not confined 100% to a wheelchair, but he cannot, he's kind of lost some of the mobility on one side of his body, especially in his hand and his grip. His dexterity is not there, and he can't get around super well, right? So he is taken to this care home, and you don't get much information about his personal life. You presume he's, not married, or perhaps he doesn't have a living spouse. And it doesn't seem like he has a lot of family in his life. Mm-hmm. And this is a theme throughout the movie where you get the idea that he has really prioritized his career and his responsibility as a judge over, creating a life outside of that for him in terms of family. And he does, like, later on express regret for that, because he's just, seems to be kind of abandoned in this nursing home.
Right.
And he's taking this very pious approach to all of his interactions in the nursing home with other people who are patients there, or I don't know what's the right word, not patients, but who are like residents there, mm-hmm. And the staff, that like, this is totally temporary. As soon as I get everything back, I'm going to be out of here. I'm better than this place is the mentality that he's taking. But so we've had this relatively like traumatic incident in the courtroom, and then he is, trying his best not to have to swallow his pride. He's out on his wheelchair, and he's kind of trying to, I don't want to say make the best of things, but he's at least interacting with another resident who's this old man who seems to be had been there for a while, is struggling to speak, is just ripping cigs, ashing all over himself. He's just kind of he's a bit of a mess. He's outside slugging on the old flask. He offers Stefan a cig, which he accepts. So he's kind of like, he's not completely dismissive and rude of everyone. Like he's talking to him, but he's very much like, no, this is temporary. I'm, this place isn't for me, kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody else up to this point has basically annoyed him because it's staff who are being congenial, but he takes that as like they're talking down to him, and kind of like, I'm sure in their minds, they may know better like what his condition is and his likeliness of, recovery is. But, they're just kind of being congenial and nice to him, but he takes it as they're being, condescending. And so he's condescending back to them. And then everybody else who is in this kind of residency home is like, it is just grades of fucked up between, people who just have dementia and don't know where they are, to people who have like degraded into nonverbal, just kind of sitting at tables, playing games or watching TV. It's just all kinds of grades of fucked up. And then his roommate, he finds annoying because, one, he didn't want a roommate to begin with. And two, his roommate is just kind of like this guy who does have people in his life from various facets, because he was a former rugby star. So like he has visitors from rugby clubs come in. He has a family at home that he still talks to. And, he just finds it really annoying when they're like on the iPad, communicating with each other and like interrupting his peace. It's not something that he wants.
Yeah, he's being very passive aggressive about the whole thing. But yeah, we get another surprising scene early on, which really doesn't have a lot to do with the rest of the movie, but it's just like shows the kind of combination of like apathy and just like I don't know, just general dysfunction in this place, I guess.
Yeah.
Is this guy's out there and he's just like swigging on his flask, and he like kind of coughs and sputters and like drops a bunch of like liquor all over his sweater. And then just as Stefan is like pulling away in his electric wheelchair, the guy just goes up like a freaking dried out Christmas tree, just completely bursts into flames. And Stefan has to like basically just sit there, screaming for help and just watching this random guy just burn to death in his wheelchair.
Yeah.
And it is unexpected. And I mean, shame on me. I did not see it coming when he was spilling the liquor and stuff. Like I did not see him bursting into flames and then us watching like a full body burn for 10 seconds.
Yeah. It was really unexpected. But it is just a good way to set up the world that we're in, with Stefan screaming for help and nobody comes. And you have this guy who just burns himself alive because nobody's really watching him or caring for him. And that's one of the great things about this movie, is the way they kind of put together the world that they're living in. It feels like a depiction of hell. If it's not, you're setting yourself on fire. Like there's constant like screams and wailing in the background of people like who don't know how to care for themselves, just screaming and wailing. You have, all these other fucked up people who are just like terrible visions of the future for yourself. And just they're not fully neglected, but the staff only shows up at the worst possible times. And this is one of those films that, like, we've talked about it in the past. Like your kids have mentioned how they hate when nobody believes the kids in a horror movie. And this is that, like I know I've mentioned it in the past where I hate where people aren't believed when something supernatural is happening. And it's like, no, like we're in the movie. Like, hey, let's get past this dumb part. I always think it's a dumb thing when like people aren't willing to listen to something crazy happening. Like, go check it out. And that's a lot of this movie, is that there's insane evil happening behind the scenes, but none of the nurses or doctors or anything could really give much of a shit about that.
It's a theme that's like, he is helpless in, physically. And then he still has, for the most part, at least for the majority of the movie, he still has his, mental faculties about him, but they're not doing anything because his credibility is shot because he is a resident of this home and everyone else is, in various states of like, dementia, Alzheimer's, that sort of thing. He also is at a disadvantage because he pretty early, runs afoul of this sociopath who also goes to, pretty diabolical lengths to ruin his, trust amongst the staff as well. But anyway, there's also this, we should mention, there's this, there's cats about that are just kind of like, home care animals that one of them is amongst all the residents has kind of come to be understood as like an omen of death. Like if this cat starts hanging around with you, that means you're not long for this world. Like this cat has some sort of supernatural ability to tell when somebody's going to die. So they all avoid it like the plague. But that'll obviously come back around. We talked about Tony, who is his roommate. And then Dave Creeley is John Lithgow's character. And he has this little puppet. Jenny Penn is what he calls the puppet. And it is a very old school type of puppet where it is just like a head on top of a little bit of fabric that you put your hand up under like a dress. And then it has two little like arms that pop out to the side. So you'd kind of like, put your, your pointer and middle finger perhaps up in the head to like move the head, but its mouth doesn't move or anything. It's basically like a baby doll head. And then you might use like your ring finger and your thumb to like move its arms around. So it's a very basic like child's puppet. It's interesting because on first glance, you're kind of like, all right, it's a creepy doll. Okay, we get it. Creepy doll. Like this, we've seen creepy doll a lot of times. But they do a really, really great job of shooting this particular creepy doll. And the one thing that struck me as very impactful is this looks like the type of doll's head that might be one of those ones where like when you lay it down, its eyes close and you pick its, up horizontal, its eyes would open. One of those kind of like sleepy time, like old timey dolls. But they've removed its eyes completely.
Yeah.
So, and they always have it backlit a lot of time, especially by like natural light. So when you're looking through the doll, you can see like the light coming through the, relatively thin plastic shell that is this doll's head. But when its eyes are pointed towards you, you're only seeing the light come through one side of the doll. So the eyes appear to be like glowing.
Yeah.
And it's really cleverly shot. And it's really impactful in a lot of instances. And of course, the doll is always on the hand of Dave Creeley, John Lithgow's character, who, is always doing fucked up, creepy shit. So that helps as well.
Yeah.
He's always talking to this doll. He's always like, it's singing little fucking songs. And he is using this doll as kind of a, how do I put it? Almost like a deterring agent to show that he's portraying himself to the staff that he is way less mental faculties than he actually does.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to point out is that, he operates at night as like this like menace. He just menaces all of the other residents at night. But the first time we're kind of really introduced to him having an interaction with somebody else is he's like interacting with the staff and he comes up with this little puppet and the staff say goodnight to Jenny Penn and that seems to like kind of placate him and then he moves on. So everybody on the staff, we assume now, is like under the impression that they think Dave Creeley is simple-minded and just is attached to this little puppet. Meanwhile, while he's menacing people, and he does use the puppet to menace people, he's much more like just in the know of like what he's doing. Yeah. It's
like he's using his like he is in fact severely mentally ill. Like he's an absolute fucking sociopath. And one of the things that really I don't want to say differentiates him because it's not that different than some other villains, but he doesn't really seem to have any reason. I mean, we get a little bit, not a reason, but a little bit of his backstory later, but it's very small amount of backstory. We never really learn why he's doing any of this.
Right.
He's just a bastard. He's just a sociopath. He's just a bastard. He's just kind of like power hungry, and he views all these people who are mentally feeble due to whatever whatever age-induced causes, right? And he is much more physically able as well. He's also like a pretty big guy, like John Lithgow.
Yeah.
He's much more like larger and physically imposing, and obviously a lot more physically fit than most of the other ones, who many of them are wheelchair bound. But yeah, he just they're just all like his little playthings essentially. So we get the first one where he's, you get the idea he's just kind of creeping around. You see him peeking indoors and stuff at night. And then eventually he just like walks in, gets the what do you call it? It's like a little piss jug, right? For people who are in the hospital that maybe would have trouble getting to the bathroom on their own. They pee into these little, it's like a little jug with like a snap-on lid. I remember when I was in the hospital, when I had a freaking drain through my abdominal wall for like 2 weeks, I had to pee in those little things. It's fucking miserable. But he comes in the middle of the night, picks it up when it's full, and just dumps it all over Stefan's crotch. Just brazenly. He sees who did it. You know what I mean? He's not being secretive about it. He walks in and brazenly does this. And then, of course, he calls for the nurses, and then it's like, oh, he just peed himself, and he's embarrassed, and he's blaming it on Dave, basically.
Mm-hmm. And at this point, like his roommate is also in the room when this happens and sees it happen.
Yeah.
But
yes.
At this point, one, Stefan has not ingratiated himself to his roommate. So we just think that, oh, okay, so Stefan's just kind of getting, the new kid bully lumps because he's been kind of an asshole to his roommate, Tony. And, now there's this other asshole who just is like claiming territory is what he's doing.
Yeah.
Is like showing who's in charge at this place.
Yep. But then it gradually gets worse and worse. He starts coming back, doing worse things. Tony will not vouch for him that Dave came in and did it. So he's like, questioning that. And then we quickly realize why Tony is so scared of Dave. And it starts to get more like just degrading and perverse, the stuff that he's doing to people, especially to Tony. He comes over and like he's got the doll, and he's like got it talking to Tony like in his face, and then he has this little ritual he does where he makes the doll like bend over and makes Tony like lick the doll's ass.
Yeah,
but it's not an ass, it's just his wrist underneath the doll. But it's this like humiliating, degrading, like psychological thing that he makes them do.
Yeah, it's just his little ritual to like reinforce that he's in charge. So
like he kind of makes them like grovel, and he does all types of horrible things to Tony. And, pretty quickly, obviously Stefan's like not giving into it. And he's like, why don't you stand up to him? Blah, blah, blah. And you could tell this has been happening for a long time. And you start to understand how widespread this manipulation and abuse, and how scared the entire, population of the home is of Dave. And we're still at a point here where Stefan, really believes he's going to recover, from his stroke and go home. So he's kind of like, he's kind of torn between like, what do I do something about this, or just like I'm gonna be out of here soon. So, fuck these people kind of thing. But then his condition's like worsening. He kind of starts to come to the realization when he like can't grab things. Like he starts to come to the realization that he's not going to recover from this. It's going to only get worse. And then there's a really dark scene where he just like he's taking a bath, and there's a lot of scenes of of him being bathed by the staff, because it's just like, to him, it's like kind of degrading, debasing, and, you know, he just feels very feeble in this idea that he can't like bathe himself, obviously. So he's in a bath, and the you know, the attendant has to step away to get a towel, and he just decides, he's like, fuck it. He just like lays down in the tub. Like, he's just gonna drown himself. But he's, you know, he panics, and it's like a really long, extended, pretty brutal scene to watch him like struggling. You just see his arms and legs kind of flailing, but she does come in and save him ultimately. But that's like a pretty big moment that really turns, you know, he kind of turns towards, you know, he kind of loses hope that he's going to ever get out of this place at that point. Yeah.
This is what I think adds to that depiction of hell type of thing, in that, like, he can't kill himself. Like, there's no escape from this now, because he couldn't drown himself. And now after this, they say, well, no more baths for you. You only get showers now. So like, not only is it a thing where like he can't escape, but also every time he tries to go against the system just punishes him again, and he, you know, will wind up losing something, or, you know, whether it be credibility or privilege or something like that. So it's just this constant grinding down of what was a really prickly, you know, person who was just averse to everybody else, and was very specific that things had to be done the way he does things. It's just him being ground down throughout the rest of the film until, you know, he becomes, you know, like a subservient, very submissive person.
Yeah. We do get really the only little bit of backstory about Dave Creeley is Stefan discovers, he's like walking down a hallway and looks through all these old staff photos that are on the wall. I think they're on the wall, if I'm not mistaken, but that Dave has been at the home for decades. He was a staff member going back to like the 60s. So what we learn is that he was just assumedly a sadistic staff member who just took joy in, you know, mistreating and manipulating the residents. And then eventually, when he assumedly retired, he just ended up working his way back. He enjoyed that lifestyle so much and that power that he felt so much that he became a resident and led people to believe he was in a lot worse, you know, mental capacity than he actually was, just so he could go on manipulating people and torturing people in this way. He also had assumed, because he knows the systems and he worked there so long, he's able to get himself a key card where he can just move freely around the facility at night. So that's why he's able to pop into people's rooms and fuck with them and all that sort of thing. So there's also, that's really all we ever learn about him.
Yeah, pretty much. There's also mention when it's shortly after the first encounter between Stefan and Creeley, that they make the staff makes mention that Creeley is a paying resident like Stefan is. So it's not that they're there because they were committed there by the state. They're there because they chose to be there. So like Stefan went there because he thought it was going to be a good place for him to recover. Creeley stayed there essentially because he just knows the place. He had the key cards, and, you know, he said, oh, well, I can just pay to be a resident here. He doesn't necessarily need to be staying here because he is competent and could probably take care of himself. But, you know, like you already mentioned,
very able-bodied. Yeah.
Like you mentioned, it's just more convenient for him if he wants to torture people, that he knows he can just get away with it with all these people who don't have the faculties to, you know, report on him. And he knows how to manipulate the staff well enough that they won't believe them anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you would think this guy who's a judge for presumably decades or whatever would be like, fairly well off, financially. But I think the way they kind of try to explain that away, like he could afford to be in a better facility. And I think the way he kind of explains that away is that like there's just not a lot of places that are accepting applicants right now. So he kind of took this as, well, this is only going to be temporary for me, so I'm just going to go to this place and then be out in weeks, which obviously was a little bit misguided. But he also doesn't really seem to have any family or anybody, in his life to really make that call for him or help him to understand that like this is going to be more permanent than you think, kind of thing.
Right.
Anyway, you see all these things that Dave does, and it's really, it just gets, it escalates, as you might imagine, but it's this back and forth between Dave trying to do things to get to Stefan, and then him, refusing to give in, and then him doing something worse, and then him refusing to give in. And it just becomes, you just see him get more and more frustrated, more and more, like you said, beat down and ground down. But you do really start to see like how wildly just perverse and insane Dave is. Eventually he has this one like very feeble-minded old woman who's always talking about how her, family's her family's traveling for Christmas, so she's just staying here and they'll be here soon. But, obviously she's not in, her right state of mind, and, she's been there for years, that sort of thing. But Dave leads her to believe that her family's there. There's this moment where you see him, vulnerabilities start to pop up with Dave. One, he does kind of mess up and accidentally gives her his key card. He lets her out and just like basically lets her out of the gate in the middle of the night, just says, hey, go down there. That's where your family is. They're waiting for you. And then he goes back and realizes she has his key card. And then he has to like run down there in the middle of the night, and like she is drowned in like a puddle basically. And he has to go down and like get his key card back. And he's, he has this whole kind of like pretty physically taxing scenario where he has to run down and find her and get his key card back and all this stuff. You also learn, well, in that scene, I think even previously before that I assume is like, he's an asthmatic, or he has some sort of like respiratory issue.
Yeah.
Where he has to use like a rescue inhaler.
Yeah, we learned this before. We learned it before in the dance scene where all the residents are kind of having just, a normal activity of like, hey, let's get up and move our feet and have a little dance to some old timey music. And Dave comes in like it's a fucking hardcore show and starts stomping on feet and bonking old people in the head with the puppet and shoving them. Yeah. Like he comes in like thrashing and just basically clears the dance floor and sends, everybody else off on their way. But at the end of that, he does have like an asthma attack. So like we that's the first time we learn he has this vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of scenes like that. That one was like, and again, that's what I mean when I say like a black comedy. There's some funny scenes early on, which is some of the, crass stuff and everything. Stefan says there's that scene where he's just walking in, just like backhanding, like not hard, but hard enough to like, they're like, oh, okay, this crazy guy's like, he doesn't like that they're all having fun dancing. So he has to go out and ruin it by just like stepping on feet and just like spinning around with his puppet and hitting people and stuff. It's weirdly funny, like the way he's kind of hitting people with his puppet and stuff. There's also a scene which honestly was one of the most affecting single shots for me, but also was like meant to be funny. There's a scene pretty early on when Stefan is still acclimating to the to the residence home, and there's this guy, and he's clearly like a entertainer that comes in fairly frequently to play guitar and sing silly songs to all the residents. Okay. And he's got a mask on, like a COVID mask. And it's like big lipsticked lips. And he's playing guitar, and they start out by like zooming in on his face, and his eyes are so wide.
Yeah.
And the way he's singing, and then the mask, he just looks rabidly insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a disturbing shot. You never see this guy again, by the way.
No. It's just another one of those. This is the life they live, and again, it's painting that depiction of hell type thing of like it too. Yeah, there's a lot of this. It's just like to a normal person, if you strip away like the extreme camera close-ups and you know the soundtrack on this film is really good because there's a lot of like unpleasant droning in the soundtrack, but like. If you stripped all that away and you just saw this in real life, you'd be like, it's kind of weird, but I guess those old people are having fun. That's what it would look like to a normal person. But we're seeing it through the eyes of Stefan, and to him, this is hell. He's being patronized by this insane looking guitar player who wants to spend his time at an old folks home. And, you know, like he goes around and tries to get everybody involved. And like when he goes to Stefan just waves him off. Like, don't try to bring me into this, this infantilizing behavior.
Yeah.
Because like he's basically singing to them the same way you sing to a kindergarten class, you know?
Yeah. And just like inserting everyone's names into the song. And some of the other old people are like, it's my turn, my turn. Like they really enjoy it. And he's just kind of like, just waves them off. Like, don't do it.
Don't ever.
And something about this guy, because you don't see his face because of the mask, but also the way he's all done up, the like really fancy guitar he has, you just start to like make assumptions about this individual of like he's so desperate to be an entertainer that he's like doing this for probably like $20 to come in and like entertain these old people. And it's just like you're just getting this like weird peek under the tent of this guy with his insane eyes where you could just see the whites of his eyes the whole way around, which is just a telltale sign that you're a psychopath, you know. It just was such a weirdly affecting scene to me. But yeah, and so I guess I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but it's just this back and forth of like Stefan, like, you know, the power of his will and this idea. I think ultimately what I got the most out of it was this idea of like everyone else has probably at one time or another tried to stand up to Dave and just failed. And just been beaten down. And you get this really tragic conversation between Stefan and Tony where he's like, Stefan's really trying to incite Tony because Tony's this former like macho rugby player, right? Like national team rugby player. But he's also like kind of self-conscious because apparently he was kind of like a bench warmer on the national team. But he's still a world-class rugby player in his youth.
Right.
So like you would expect he was like an elite level athlete. So Stefan's trying to like appeal to that like pride, but Tony's just like not up for it. He's just so beaten down. And he has this really tragic moment where he basically explains of like, he thinks he assumes we have to assume he's been threatened by Dave to basically kill him and leave him in some sort of like compromising position. Like he explains this guy who was found with like a 12-inch pink dildo in his ass or something. I don't know. But he thinks Dave's going to do something like that to him.
Right.
And he has like, he doesn't value his life anymore, but he values the way he would be portrayed by his family because he, you know, obviously cares for his family so much. So it's just tragic that Dave's just given into this.
Yeah.
And it's like a battle of will between Stefan and his like pursuit to stand up to this you know, what seems like this insurmountable bully, essentially. And it's just this tug of war the whole movie. And I will say, it kind of goes on. I don't think the movie's too long, but it is long.
Yeah, it's long. The pacing is different because we see so much of like Dave Creeley's side of things. Like, it's not just that we follow Stefan and, you know, he's harassed by Dave Creeley, but we see a lot of scenes of Dave on his own when he is like, when Stefan stands up to him and doesn't submit to, you know, Creeley's will. Well, then we have to go follow Creeley and see how he, you know, takes his revenge on somebody else, you know, because he didn't get his satisfaction from Stefan submitting to him. So that means he has to go do something fucked up to somebody else, which is like letting that one woman wander out on her own, or simply just finding a guy who's laying in the hallway and closing the door on him to let him die, you know, like not calling for help, just letting this dude die on his own. So like, yeah, he has like all of these kind of just, you know, repercussive acts that we watch, you know, because Stefan, he can't grind Stefan down. So yeah, it does make the pacing of the film a little weird, and it does make it longer. But I also think because this is based off of a short story, there's probably a lot more details in that short story. And I think that's why it also feels like a Stephen King type deal, where like we see a lot of detail in a person's life and a lot of detail about their character. So it doesn't feel boring because we're not spinning our wheels.
No, it doesn't seem boring. But you do become aware that this is like, it's quite a long film. But he ultimately, you know, decides like, hey, like I need to kill this motherfucker. Like that's really the only thing I can do. So he does this, you know, fairly ingenious thing where he, if I recall, he moves the doll because he knows that Dave will know it was him. But then Dave likes to do this little dance and this little song and dance thing where he sings this song about like knees up, Mother Brown. It seems like this old, like, I don't know, English folky song or something. Yeah. And he does this whole obnoxious song and dance with the doll and basically makes everybody watch him. It's another power move, right? And he knows that he's going to do that kind of almost as a show of power and authority, because he knows Dave is going to know that it was probably Stefan who was in his room. But in doing so, Stefan also is one step ahead of him and goes and empties all of his inhalers, his rescue inhalers. So he knows he's going to get all worked up doing this dance, and then he's not going to be able to have his inhaler. So it works, and Dave Creeley does, you know, pass out, and everyone just kind of watches and just like obviously doesn't call for help. Meanwhile, why is there literally not one staff member the entire time that's happening? But that's just kind of a convenience we have to suspend our disbelief on. But it does work. But unfortunately, Dave does survive. There's another scene. I might be going out of order here, but there's another scene where he thinks that Dave is dead, but then when Dave is back, and all of a sudden, I should say Stefan is starting to lose his faculties a little bit. You could see, you know, he's deteriorating. His health is deteriorating. And he just like all of a sudden looks down and his wheelchair is moving really fast on the carpet.
Yeah.
It's a really I don't know, just effective scene. And then he looks up and it's Dave Creeley who's just shoving him down down the hallway. And then eventually like dumps him out of his wheelchair. And then there's this couple, which I don't know if we learn their names, but it's just two elderly people who presumably were residents in the home and then started a relationship while there. Mm-hmm. So they're both older. They're both, relatively feeble, but they are in, some degree of like committed relationship. it takes a lot of dark things happening here. I mean, we've already seen him like tugging on Tony's catheter and shit. Like, right, it's not great, right?
Yeah, it's I was wondering how far this scene was gonna go. But he gets into some dark stuff here.
Yeah, he decides he's going to sexually assault the woman in front of her significant other and Stefan. And it goes on for a long time. It's tough to watch because she's also kind of like, again, not in her full mental faculties. But ultimately, we do get a little bit of a hint that like Stefan is really trying to like focus on his exercises and all that stuff to like to get a little bit better. But he's not necessarily getting better, but he is perhaps prolonging his ability to, I don't know, stay relatively fit and in his right mind. He does ultimately manage to stand up, get a cane, and whack Dave Creeley with it enough to injure him, knock him down, and basically stop him from further sexually assaulting the old woman. But of course they come in, the staff comes in, sees him holding a cane, Dave on the ground, the woman's like clothes half off, and thinks that he's responsible. So, he saved the day, but you never really get it. You also don't really see him get a lot of repercussions for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in that moment, you think like, oh, he's going to be blamed for what's happening here. But
yeah, the other thing, just like leading up to that scene, because you said like you were wondering if you were skipping around, but actually it's the editing that's skipping up to that scene, because we get, after Creeley goes down, we kind of get this respite of they're all sitting in the TV room, and like it's already been showcased that like Creeley usually dominates the TV. So now we get this scene where Tony and Stefan get to sit, front and center of the TV, and everybody gets to enjoy the TV equally. And then Stefan kind of nods off, and it's a jump cut to him in an empty room. Everybody else has moved on. And then it's a jump cut to that wheelchair moving down the hallway. I just like the way the light was reflecting off the metal panels on his wheelchair.
Oh yeah, that too. He's just seeing this. It's like the first thing he notices is like these flashes of light.
Yeah. And
it's shot. I mean, I should say we haven't really mentioned the cinematography in this movie is fucking fantastic. And they do this image, this thing where you're seeing those lights fly and he's noticing them, but you're not really ahead of Stefan.
Right.
Because you both realize at the same time that what you're seeing is the overhead fluorescent lights reflecting off of the little part of his wheelchair. And then when he looks down to see that, you also see the carpet pattern whizzing by. So you're like, whoa, he's going really fast in his wheelchair. What the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
So you're just as confused and scared as he is,
Yeah. And then he looks back and it's John Lithgow's face. And it's like John Lithgow has done this a lot. He loves putting in dirty fake teeth. He just loves having weird, fucked up teeth when he plays a bad guy, which is what made me think a lot about Buckaroo Banzai, because he has real fucked up teeth in that movie too. But yeah, he's just leaning over the chair, just laughing in his face. Like, oh, this thing is. You're confused. You're still confused because you're like, oh, did he die? Did he not die? And now here he is, just like scream laughing in his face, and then. He dumps him in the room, and then this this scene plays out. But yeah, up until this scene starts to play out, we weren't sure that Creeley was dead or not. And like this scene, just again, it's just more of that hell stuff, because the one guy is just screaming at the top of his lungs, kind of the blind guy in the relationship. He's just screaming at the top of his lungs. He's not saying anything. He's screaming. She is traumatized, and Stefan just falls to the ground because he's overexerted himself, and assumedly, like, perhaps caused a second stroke in himself.
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole sequence, like I said, he does get kind of musters the physical fortitude to get up and fend off Creeley with the cane. But eventually we do kind of get this turning point where Tony kind of says, like, all right, enough's enough. You get this again. He's just such a tragic character. But he does his, like, oh boy, I forgot to look up what it's called, but you've probably seen on social media. Yeah. This, like, almost war chant type of ritual that you see rugby players, especially like Australia, I think more specifically New Zealand rugby players do ahead of it. So it's a very kind of machismo centric, like stomping, pounding, yelling, kind of getting yourself psyched up for a rugby match type of thing. And he decides he's kind of going to do that to Creeley, but it's, it obviously is left, he's got a bad hip. He's all fucked up.
Yeah,
he starts crying.
He's got a bad hip, a bad leg. Yeah. So Tony tries to do the haka, and I'll just point this out. Tony's played by an actor by the name of George Henare, and George Henare was, he's a known New Zealand actor, but he was probably in the most known New Zealand movie for a long time, which it's a real fucking like film student film, but from this movie called from 1994 is called Once Were Warriors, and it's about it has this kind of Spike Lee flair about it, but it's telling the story of just kind of like dysfunctional Maori family in New Zealand. And so, like, that's why George Henare is in it, because, like, he is, a Maori, and even John Lithgow has, like, this racist joke during the film to degrade. Oh yeah. To degrade to degrade Tony in front of him, but he's like putting down Maoris. That's why George tries to enact the haka, which is like a ceremonial dance which has been adopted to rugby procession.
Sure.
But like, it comes from that culture, which is what it comes from. But yeah, this movie Once Were Warriors was like a very Spike Lee type film, showing just kind of like a hard living Maori family that George was a part of. So that's your film student watch for the homework. Go check out that film.
Yeah. Probably doesn't get his catheter tugged on during that movie, I would assume.
I don't think so. Oh, also the other part of that film is the guy who plays Django and Boba Fett nowadays. That was like his big starring role. He came from that film because he was so like just affecting in that film. Like he's just this fucking drunk, abusive husband. And so everybody saw that film and go, damn, what a good actor. I should make him a fucking space bounty hunter.
Make that guy a fucking space bounty hunter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so this is, I mean, we're kind of spiraling towards, there's a couple things that happen that are pretty interesting, like cinematic or cinematography decisions, where and they're, for a quick moment, a couple times when they happen, especially the first time, you're almost like, wait, is there something like supernatural here that's going on that I don't, but it ends up being just this kind of symbolic image of Jenny Penn, the dummy or the doll, and like how looming Creeley's, power of manipulation and like physical terror he has over people. You see these images of like the Jenny Penn doll, like really large and looming, like behind him. And it's really because you are following Stefan, who is becoming slowly a less reliable narrator, I guess, too. You don't really know what you're seeing, how it's meant to be represented, what it means. But I think ultimately it's kind of showing just how much of a looming figure he is, and like how insurmountable he seems at times,
right?
How threatening he seems at times. So it's just this big, giant, looks to be 12-foot tall version of the doll's head, just like behind him, at times. One other bit of symbolism too, and I was trying to Google it to remember what it was. Like I said, I was running while I was watching this, so I didn't write it down. But there's a pretty famous piece of music that's played. And I think the title of it has something to do with like whenever they have the orchestra, the small little orchestra that's coming into play at the home, and you have Creeley like kind of staring at Tony across the area where the orchestra's playing. But if I'm not mistaken, the name of the piece, I forget. Oh gosh. I recognized it from freaking the one classical music course I took in college, but it was I think it's called Death or something like that. It's something to do with death is the name of the piece of music that was played. It's from it's not Tchaikovsky, but it's a pretty well-known, major composer as well. It's not Debussy. It's boy, I can't remember it. Forgot to Debussy. I can't remember, but it's somebody prominent like that, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the name of the piece they're playing is something to do with like death or like final, suggesting the finality of death or whatever. But this also ultimately, leads up to really, if you think about it, what Stefan and Tony should have done day one, which is jump his ass in the laundry room. I mean, if you've ever seen a prison movie, the first thing you do is you find the baddest motherfucker and you jump his ass in the laundry room day one.
Right.
Like when you get put in this institution. But they let it go too long. But they ultimately do just that. They wait for him, and Stefan and Tony jump his ass in the laundry room and suffocate him to death. So that's the end of Dave Creeley. However, we do get this, you get this, hey, everything's great now at the retirement home. Everyone's relaxed. Everyone's having fun. You have more of this kind of serene environment now that everyone's out from, under the thumb of Dave Creeley. But then, of course, the harbinger of death, Cat, does come rolling up on Stefan at the end. So, but he's, and then you get him outside burning the Jenny Penn doll.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of things that like wrapped it up is like, it's, he ultimately stood up to his bully. He ultimately overcame what seemed to be this insurmountable obstacle. But I guess what they're trying to say is like beg the question is like, at what cost, I guess. But also he does seem pretty content in his course of action. So it's like at a very significant cost, because it ultimately resulted in him having like what seemed to be a second stroke, because his face started to like droop and stuff. And he's obviously, his health is way worse off than before this whole ordeal. But it's like better to do that and suffer the consequences than just like have this long standing suffering at the hands of this villain, I guess.
Yeah. And it's not just all about him, is what he's supposed to be learning, and what he assumedly does learn. Yes. Is that it's not about his life and his comfort. Part part of this film has been about grinding him down from Creeley's point of view to grind him into, like a submissive that everybody else is. But it's also more about getting him to accept that this is where his life is now. And he can do things that are about helping others. But if he stays on that selfish path, like, nobody's going to help him. Like, it's just going to result in his death completely. So that's why he has to learn to, do the right thing, overcome Creeley, and then he can live at peace knowing everybody else will be at peace, even though he'll be dead anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. He's that, I guess that bit of like serenity, like they take the moment to really really show people like enjoying themselves. And there's actually a really impactful little moment too of like whenever, and this actually might have been before they really do kill Creeley. And I think it might have been after, he tricked him and emptied all of his rescue inhalers. But there's a moment where him and Tony come in for breakfast in the morning and they're looking around and Creeley's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all kind of like smiling at each other like, oh, we kind of did it. Maybe we did it. And then there's this woman across the way who, the way she's sitting, she's kind of sitting almost like a child would, with like her chin on the table. And she is kind of gives them this nod of like, wow, he's not here.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. So ultimately he does come back, but I don't know. It's just like that felt like a little bit of a turning point too for Stefan to start realizing like, this is not just for me. This is for the greater good of this little community that, for better or for worse, whether I like it or not, I'm a part of now.
Yeah. Yeah. Just in general, like, even though it's not the way it is, because as we've talked about, like how the soundtrack and just like the background of this film is just full of screams and full of like, just desperate people in the background is all you hear. Mm-hmm. And, people who wind up setting themselves on fire. It seemed like all of that stopped when they thought Creeley was dead. It seemed like all of that chaos ended. And so maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't attributable to him, but at the very least, he doesn't break into their dance parties and start moshing again. So
yeah. He doesn't wake in and walk into their and dump and just cover them in piss in the middle of the night.
Or bonk them on the head with a puppet.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's it. So we do get our, we get our revenge, because this is one of those movies, not unlike, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or something like that, where it's just like you have this horrible villain in this position of power that you just desperately want to see them get their comeuppance the whole movie. Mm-hmm. And we do, but it's not in a fairy tale way. It's not in a like artificially satisfying way. It's in like a, wow, we paid the price, but we ultimately got rid of them kind of way.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, really good, really great performances. Certainly not a feel good movie.
No, not until the end.
I will not lie. Well, yeah, you have that little bit at the end, that little bit of gets his retribution at the end, but definitely not a movie that's I would not suggest running 8 miles while watching in the future.
Yeah, it's not a feel good. But like, I don't know. It's just one of those things where you watch it and you do feel empathy for a lot of the people in that situation. And you feel bad that, they are being tormented by this absolute monster. And it's interesting that they also give you a very flawed protagonist to root for. Like he's a fucking asshole, but he's not the worst thing that's happening. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the best types. Like if he was like, if there was somebody in there who was just a total fucking Mary Sue, like that would have been this movie would have been dog shit.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
You know, his like assholey behavior and his like kind of this journey of having to like ultimately like debase himself from like attempting suicide to you know, feeling like victimized and helpless to triumphing only to learn that he hadn't triumphed to doing it again. You know, it's a bit of a harrowing journey for a movie that takes place almost 100% in a nursing home.
Yeah. Yep.
But great watch. Absolutely would suggest this one. Yeah.
Yep.
Any other thoughts before we wrap this sumbitch up?
No, just a definite, suggested watch for me. And, we didn't give a whole lot away, but like they do a lot to illustrate how Stefan's decline is progressing. And, we see a lot of scenes of like, again, it's that evolution of a character. We see his decline and we see a lot of things that are happening to him. So like it does protract the movie, but it doesn't make it, again, you don't feel like you're spinning wheels because you're learning more about this character as things go on and his life gets different. And then, a black comedy punchline where the cat is just at his side,
Yeah. And it's almost like, you could take that a lot of ways of like, hey, after all that, you're still going to die. Or you could think about it as like, hey, in some cosmic way, here's your reward.
Right.
Here's your sweet release of death. Although hopefully it does not come in the same way that the Harbinger kind of predicted the death of that guy who went up like a fucking, Human Torch in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, that is something we skipped over, but like there is a pretty just like despicable, but like it's just a very mean-spirited scene between Creeley and Stefan, and they're just having a meal together, and like Creeley is pointing out this other guy in the home who is basically become vegetative and can only just barely aware of his surroundings. And for Stefan, who prides himself so much on his intelligence, this threat of becoming a person like that is what's terrifying to him. So the cat giving him his final reward is actually just that. It's a reward so he doesn't become what he really truly fears, is like somebody just stuck in a chair of like no awareness of their life.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you're right. I think that definitely gives it a more definitive tone of a release, because I forgot about that scene. That is, to him, that is a fate much worse than death. So he'd rather, and we've already come to terms with the fact that he'd like prefer to die over what is happening to him.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Anyway, if you're looking for, if you've had enough depressing, elder abuse and you're looking for fish cults, you'd like to switch it up and go towards some fish cults, go watch Dagon from 2001. That's going to be my movie for Creatures from the Deep. Steven is going to talk about Sea Fever from 2019, which is a fun flick if you've not seen that one already. And then our guests from the Final Girls podcast, Kelly and Sarah, are going to be talking about Underwater from 2020 and Deep Rising from 1998, respectively. So go check those out this week and join us next week, the first Monday in April, where we talk about some motherfuckers creatures from the deep. Anything else I'm forgetting before we wrap this sumbitch up?
No, that's about it.
Yeah. All right, guys, it's going to get wet and wild next week with Creatures from the Deep. For the Halloween is Forever crew, I'm Brian.
And I'm Geauga Lake.
Because of how wet and wild it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, bye.
Yeah.
All right, bye.
Bye.